Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine, the boat show going on today at the Knoxville Convention Center. I can't encourage you enough to get over to the Knoxville Convention Center today. Check out the Madisonville Marine selection that they have inside the center there. They've got great incentives. They've got tremendous deals, rebates. Basically, they've got deals on Hurricane, Sweetwater, Aqua Patio boats, G3 boats, Skeeter boats. We're talking factory rebates. In some cases, that go as high as $3,000. Madisonville Marine has the biggest selections of boats anywhere in East Tennessee, and they've got a great selection over at the boat show. Get over there today and see it for yourself. Madisonville Marine. All right. I want to welcome in the next round of panelists we have right here from a freelance columnist from the Knoxville News Sentinel, Bob Hodge.
Good morning.
Good morning. We have right there Chuck Cavaleris, freelance to the world. There's nothing he doesn't freelance. Chuck, thanks for being with us.
Great to be here.
All right. Let's start spring practice updates. The big story. The T on the helmet stands for turmoil. There's always something. Pig Howard, it comes out this week. Pig Howard not going to be with the team during spring practice, taking a leave of absence. No word yet on how long that's going to take. This is a young man who caught more passes for Tennessee last year than anyone else. What is the situation with Pig Howard? How big of a deal is it not to have him out there?
I think it's a fairly big deal not to have him out there because you don't know exactly what your quarterback situation is going to be. I think Pig Howard last year was one of the few players you had that looked like he could go to any team in the SEC and he's going to be playing on that team. He looked like a good SEC player. So I think not having him out there as this team kind of transitions to sort of a younger team, I think it's going to be pretty big.
Well, anytime you lose your leading receiver, it hurts you. But I think it's going to be mitigated because I think they did a great job recruiting receivers. So I think it's Von Pearson. He made a move in practice the other day that reminded you of Cordell Patterson. He took Cameron Sutton and let's just say Sutton left some laundry on the field. and they've got Josh Malone who's really good. I think they've done a good job there. But yeah, you can't take the leading receiver and say it's not going to bother you some. But I think these other guys are going to help offset his departure.
It'd just be nice for the continuity.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, you'd like to have them all out there working as a unit together. Injury situation overall, guys, your thoughts? Vol started down 6 scholarship players. Tight end Brendan Downs, wide receiver Dre Bowles, wide receiver Ryan Jenkins, defensive tackle Tavares Salisbury, and you're short on defensive tackles. Tight end A.J. Branisell, safety Brian Randolph. We talked about it last year. You don't want to leave spring practice with a bunch of injuries. They started out with 6. Concerns about bodies at this point for Tennessee?
Well, you're always concerned, but I think 6, if you 6 out of a...
That's where you top out?
I think that's probably typical and less than in a lot of years.
The concern to me off that list would be at tight end because that's a position you really didn't get enough out of, and you're looking for somebody to step in there. So, I mean, and is that give somebody else a chance? You know, Pig Howard, he had, 44 catches, was second on the team in yards. I think it's really a bigger deal for him, and what does his future hold? Is there a question about even if he comes back? So, I mean, that just opens it up for somebody else.
I agree, both for tight ends. They got those 2 freshmen early enrollees. For the receivers, they got early enrollees. I don't think it's terrible not having Brendan Downs or Pig Howard out there at spring practice. It's more reps for the young guys.
Okay. Some moves that speak to a little bit of depth issues, I think, in certain areas. Devrin Young moved from receiver. He started running back, then they moved him to receiver. Now they've moved him back to running back for the spring. They said they'll still line him up in the slot some. Nico Kramer going to start at linebacker, which I thought was interesting. Only 5 defensive tackles for the spring. That's tough now. That Salisbury injury may be the one that stands out. And then Kurt Magid's going to be back, and Butch Jones has already said we're going to use him all over the field. Thoughts on any of these moves? Did any of them surprise you, Jimmy?
It depends on when you ask me. Kramer, initially I thought might start on offense, but then there is a greater need on defense. When he ended up getting some pretty good receivers signed, I thought it made sense to start him on defense. Magid all over the field. I guess I'm not as surprised by that is a guy that hadn't played a snap for Butch Jones, and Butch Jones said this is the heart and soul of our defense. And he's got A.J. Johnson and some other players back, and that's the heart and soul of your defense. I thought that was an interesting comment.
I hope this heart and soul turns out better than the guy that last year. This team will go as far.
Daniel McCullers.
Yep,
Well, they did.
All right. Coaching staff returns in full for the first time since 2007. Now, they have added a GA, Nick Sheridan, who was an actual on-the-field coach for South Florida. He'll be working with quarterbacks this year. Thoughts on having continuity across your staff for the first time in
It's
a
huge,
decade?
'cause I mean, look at how many some of these position players have had at least 3 or 4 different position coaches, and also think about it in terms of recruiting. How important it is that these coaches have been into high schools, and now they're going back in and they're still here. And a lot of other coaches have had several changes. So, I mean, a lot of the staffs. I mean, I think that's huge for Tennessee.
And I think it's even more important with the losses that Tennessee's had, offensive and defensive lines. You know what you're going to be doing at practice. You know what techniques you're going to be used during the games. So you're not starting from square one with young guys. You've actually, even though you're going to be young and inexperienced, they've had a year in the system. So that's going to help you a little bit without mixing it up like they seem to do every year.
Okay. We mentioned this last week that Athlon went through and ranked the rosters in the SEC based solely on the recruiting rankings for the last 5 years. Well, that doesn't take into account the turnover that you had at the coaching staff and the number of bodies who left early, et cetera, et cetera. They had Tennessee ranked as the 6th best team in the SEC. That was a week ago. This week they came out and did it for the nation. They ranked Tennessee as the 13th best roster in the country based on the last 5 recruiting classes. This for a team, mind you, that is the only team in the nation without a single starter returning on the offensive or defensive line. No one else in America facing that. This Athlon thing, it's going to get kicked around, and by the time August hits here, you're going to have people saying, well, Butch should do better because they got the 13th best roster in America. That is bull, folks. that is absolute
No,
junk.
I write for Lindy's, but
Do you write for Athlon?
No.
Okay, good. Then I won't berate either one of you.
Nonsense.
I was visiting with Butch the other day, and I mentioned that to him, and to get his reaction. And after he got out of his chair from falling, he said, "What's the criteria?" And I said, "I think it's just the recruiting rankings." He said, "Well, don't they realize that Tennessee lost this?" And I said, "They should realize it," but yeah, he was a little bit surprised at that.
Win an entire class without an offensive lineman.
Do they still have Carl Pickens on their roster?
Yeah, exactly. Jimmy, you had an interesting stat that you put up on Twitter this week. What was it 46?
46 of 95, and that counts 10 walk-ons in that group. Of the 95 that are available in the spring, 46 are going through their first spring practice at Tennessee.
That's absolutely stunning. You know, even at this point, with all the turnover you've had, that's still incredible that half your team has never been through a spring practice, which gets back to the fact that despite what you see on Athlon, listen to me now. Listen to me now. I don't think anybody here is going to – I think Tennessee's going to fight. They're going to have to fight hard to improve on last year's record. So anybody that's going into this saying, well, we expect to be 6-6, 7-5, you got a tough schedule, as tough or tougher than last year. You got youth on both lines. You don't have tons of depth in areas. I just don't see it. You're going to hear me say that all summer long. And anybody disagree that it's going to be a struggle to get to 6-6?
Oh, no, it's lowered my expectations quite a bit. I've had them at 10-2. I'm going 9-3.
No, you're being really negative.
People right there, there's some that are not taking that seriously.
This is all outweighed by the fact that Joshua Dobbs has gained 15 pounds.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Dobbs has put on weight, and so has Riley Ferguson. Big
He's
deal.
getting 25.
All right, he's now up to 160. Just kidding. All right, when we come back on the Sports Source, we'll take a look at the SEC tournament bracket behind these two guys. What does Tennessee need to do to get into the NCAA tournament? How do you prep for that many games in a row? We'll ask the former Tennessee coaches here, although it's been about since Don DeVoe was the head coach, they had much success. So we'll talk about that when we come back on the Sports Source.